Hi everyone, this is your favorite friend, Jay or Jaylan Salah, as you formerly know her, film critic at Geek Vibes Nation and In Session Film. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing director Colin Henning about his first feature, Appalachian Dog, in which he also plays the male lead, Teddy, and editor Chad Hylton to talk about this intense drama. I mean, I was in awe of it, watching back and forth between the characters and the amazing backdrop of nature. So I want to tell you thank you for talking to me.
Oh my God, the pleasure is all mine. Please, yes.
Okay, so Colin, why this project?
You know what? It's such an interesting question. I wish I had like a really clear answer. I feel like the thing that attracts me most about a project is the message and the theme of it. And I think that's part of why I really love working in period pieces because it kind of like simultaneously isolates an audience because it's like, oh, that's back then, you know? But at the same time, it draws you in, whether that's because you're interested in the period or because you grow to discover, it wasn't that different. Um, and I think this idea of pushing away what you run towards is something that I just return to time and time again in my writing. And the feasibility of being able to do this movie ourselves. I mean, I'm from North Carolina, so we're able to utilize a lot of our resources there. And Georgia had always loved post World War II era because of what that does for culture and for women. And I think there are so few times in world history where you can pinpoint such a huge overhauling change globally that even in this tiny isolated mountain town where you really only have these four main characters, even they're feeling it.
Perfect. So I want to know, as a director and an actor, how did you approach Teddy? Because such a complex character, I gotta tell you.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's like as the writer, you can think you know so much about a character, and as the writer and director, I really see where he fits in this larger story. And then as the actor, you have to be completely unaware of that. And the way that I, as an actor, ended up connecting with that character, I think, is very different than I would have imagined. And I think watching the film back and everything, it's a very different performance than I might have gotten if I had chosen to like cast someone else. Um, so that I guess is very cool to me, that it ended up working so well despite the fact that my approach was different than I might have anticipated. And yeah, I guess I can just say that the need to kind of like put those blinders on when you're being the actor and really just focus on what's ahead of you is what really helped me, because that is so much of what Teddy's going through. Is, I mean, he's coming back after 5 years. He doesn't remember, or he only remembers the way he liked his life, and we're never going to remember the bad things. So he's coming in with super high expectations, and life has gone on without him for 5 years. I mean, him and his wife ran a business together. That business still had to run. And the ability to cope with that when you're a man in, 1946, I mean, honestly, if you're a man now, even, is very challenging. And I think you see that dissonance in the relationships, but also within himself.
It's so true. Chad, what is the most challenging aspect about editing this project? Because I feel like there are long takes and there are moments of silence, but then there is also dialogue. So, as an editor, how challenging was it for you?
Oh my God, it was so fun because I've never edited a piece quite like this. I mean, this is, a Southern Gothic. This is something that, is his wheelhouse that um I was very excited about the challenge. And I found that all I had to, so I found that it was the most successful when I kind of like got out of everyone's way. Like, because I'm an editor, I love to like get in there and, oh, let me tweak this, tweak that. And of course, there's always tweaking involved, but it was all in the writing and the performances. So I found that the scenes in these like one takes played so successfully that I was like, oh, I'm just gonna let this scene play. And then I found that I had like some of the heaviest hand editorially in the transitions between scenes. So it's kind of like setting you up for the kind of tense scene that's to come, because it's like we play with genre so much in this movie. It's kind of like an in between. It's like, do I laugh? I'm just like uncomfortable. So there's not a lot of prescribing in moment to moment. So it's not like there's like heavy music or anything. You know, a lot of the soundscape is like from elements of the world, of the woods, of the creaking cabin. So that kind of, uncertainty was just kind of like my guidepost throughout. So I would find that I would just like let a scene play, and then I would, really heighten up whatever moment was kind of happening. And then I would drop them out of it in the transitions, because I never want you to get too comfortable. I never want you to be like, oh, great, things are good. Like there should be this kind of underlying tension the entire time. So it was fun. It was like the sound was the thing that was, to me, the most beautiful kind of journey of discovery in the film.
True, that's true. The ambience of the whole setting itself. So, okay, we always hear about the arguments between editor and filmmaker in the editing room. Does this happen, and how do you resolve it, both of you?
Well, because we're partners. We're partners in life and arts. We've been together for now like 7 years.
I know.
And whenever we tell people that we work together so closely, their first reaction is always, "Oh, I can never work with my partner like that. That's how do you do it?" And I think it's because we found each other. I mean, we found each other through our love of film. That's like how we met. Mm-hmm. We met in college, and wow. He reached out to me because he saw one of my short films. And then he wanted some advice. And then I was like, oh, I was all puffed out. I was like, oh, someone wants to hear what I have to say. And I was in college. And I think just, I don't know, because we're always focused on the story. And that's our big goal, is what does this mean? Not necessarily it has to be this certain way. And maybe you can speak on that too, because that's one of your guideposts in directing.
Very much. I mean, my like kind of shining beacon is this idea of, don't fall in love with any one way you want something, fall in love with what it means. Because that's going to mean you're always problem solving. It means you're never going to get caught up in like the small details. You're always remembering that main message that you want to send. And that's true in writing, that's true in directing, and that's very true in editing, because if we have the footage, if something's like not quite working, it doesn't become about like the way that I wanted it or the way that he wanted it. It's a matter of recognizing, like, honestly, does this work? And if it does, great. And why? Because it's always good to know why things work. And, if it doesn't, then you really need to know why, so you can know how to fix it.
It's like taking the kind of ego out of it. And we all have egos, as we should. Like, we all should think that we're like the greatest. But it's like kind of taking yourself out of it and just like, does this service the story? Mm-hmm. And we'll sit just like this when I'm editing. It'll be me and he'll be right there. And he's very hands-on. It's been great.
Huh. Okay. What I always ask directors is, how do you deal with creating an environment where actors can be vulnerable and yet feel protected, but you're also acting? So how do you maintain this vulnerability for yourself, for your co-stars, but also as a director, you are controlling the environment? Because this is so mesmerizing to me.
Yeah, it's a large part of it came down to scheduling. So and at a certain point in the movie, we have what I refer to as like the not couple scenes, where we have like Teddy and Kate paired off, and then Marion and Peggy. And when we were filming those scenes, what we would do is essentially film those all, in a day or two together. So those actors get the experience of that emotional progression. And then I don't have to worry about acting during that period of time. I get to like just be their director and cultivate that space for them. And then, the reverse of that is then when it came the day that I was doing all those scenes with Kate, that's really my time to then step into that. And I just trust, Georgia and Hayleigh so much, who play Marion and Peggy. So they're on set getting to kind of like watch me. I get to like ask them questions, because it is very hard to direct oneself. And a large part of the success of that comes through just trusting the people that I'm working with. I mean, trusting whoever I'm doing my scene with, and then trusting who has eyes on it. I mean, even Aidan, our cinematographer, I mean, like for some of the scenes where I'm in it, I would trust him to be the one to call action, because it's like hard to have that kind of like, and action, now I'm in the scene, because that's just, it's not really how it works. Yeah. so a huge part of it was just trust, and I mean that does include trust in myself, which I think is something that I've learned a lot also in post production.
Because this
Hmm.
movie mainly, okay, Chad, do you want to say something? Because I feel like there's always a take that I want to hear from you.
Oh, it's like it's also it's the trust and it's building the relationships with the people on set. What's good is like we've known a lot of these people for a long time. And we met at Purchase College. Most of the people in the film,
Mm-hmm.
and we're like a collective of artists that have been growing together. So it felt like family, I would say.
Yeah.
And also, it was a very intimate set too.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of extra bodies around. Also, I mean, it's indie filmmaking. It helps keep the budget right. So it was only 6 people on set at any given time, because we were also like living in the place that we were living in the cabin that we were shooting.
Yeah. Which I'm
So
sure like
yeah,
really made people feel at home.
and comfortable and
Yeah.
immersed. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's like Georgia never has to like show up to set. Like we're all living in that cabin where we filmed. And I think that creates that wonderful blend of actor and character. And you get to go to sleep at night and let it go. But at the same time, you don't have to like show up the next day and re-get yourself there,
yeah,
because you're experiencing it with everybody. And there's, an intensity about that, but there also is a safety about that.
yeah.
I also love that because desire is a major theme in this film, and I feel like it
Mhm.
controls everything and everyone, especially the character of Marion. I was so intrigued by her desire journeys. There's an amazing intimate scene with Teddy, but there's also the scene with Peggy, where it feels like there's this invisible thread of sexual tension. And I was so intrigued. Like, how did you get this out of the actress? Because she was great, and the scene itself was these two particular scenes. I kept like watching and feeling like, wow, okay. As a woman, I was like, okay, this is wonderful. I want to see these scenes again and again. So, how did you get this performance and these intensities between the actors?
Yeah, I mean
Mm.
for the scene between Teddy and Marion at the river,
Yes.
that was really like a lot of that was paperwork between Georgia and I, kind of sitting down and really talking through the different, emotional beats of the scene, because that's a really beautiful scene to show that sex isn't necessarily always intimate.
That's
Um,
true.
and they are connecting, but it's almost as an excuse to not connect in other ways. And so figuring out exactly why some of those decisions are made, why she even takes off the glasses at the very beginning of that scene, why he doesn't kiss her after that, like those little things when you're trying to, reconnect with somebody can mean so much. So we really walked through those tiny things, and then practically speaking, we filmed that scene really like as an enclosed set, so there isn't that feeling. It's not like a Hollywood movie where you're filming like a sex scene and you feel like you're doing it in the middle of Walmart or something. It did foster a safe environment, and it was also a very funny scene to film because it's like that riverbank was actually really steeply sloped. So like there's points where like she's almost sliding backwards and I'm like hooking my feet between like a tree trunk or a tree root so I don't slide, and I'm holding on to her. Yeah, I know. So it was, those things keep it light, and I think you need those moments of levity to like go deep.
Yeah, and what about the scene with Peggy
And the scene with
Yes.
Peggy, yeah, I mean I'll say as a director that is probably my favorite scene.
Wow.
It was something that it really gets to the heart of these two people's connection, but I think also their where their values don't quite align. That's where you start to see that hint of, we like each other, but maybe we don't see things and see relationships in the same way. That really just starts to appear there. What was really important to me in that scene, working with Hayleigh, was emphasizing that Peggy doesn't have any shame about being in love with a woman. She has shame about being in love with a married woman, someone who's unavailable. Commitments mean so much to Peggy. She spends so much of her life taking care of her mother. She doesn't want to feel like she's infringing on someone else's relationship. But at the same time, when that opportunity is presenting itself, and you have had feelings for 5 years that strong, how do you say no? And for Marion, it's very similar. And I think Marion's somebody who's really coming to figure out what those feelings even are. And so as those opportunities with Peggy are presenting itself, I think she's a little more eager to take them and push them forward. And she's living so instinctually because of what her husband coming home has done to her. I think everything for Marion feels so urgent and so immediate that the self-destructive behavior is for Marion only self-destructive in hindsight, because the moment that she's making those decisions, she thinks it's going to help her.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I feel like the film has a commentary on the facade of traditional masculinity, which is something that makes me cringe. And I love the idea of showing this seriously, like, no, get it out of our face, please. So the idea of just presenting this character and showing him, like going up and down and going through all these emotions and discoveries and even coming to terms with everything in his life, or even not knowing like a fixed line for what he feels and how he feels it. Teddy is a very compelling character. He starts with something, at least we see him from a starting point, and then ends at something else. How did you handle him, this character?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a lot of it is, as an actor, a lot of it is the kind of homework you do before you even show up to set, um, which is hard when you write the script. So it's kind of like sitting down and then reading that script as though I've never written it was really, really helpful for me, because then, when you're writing something and your theme is so concise, like I hope mine is, you begin to discover things that are kind of like unintentional in the writing of the character. And that's always really fun, because those are the kinds of things that you get to grab onto. For Teddy, it really was about having, I guess, the contrast between really playing it like one moment at a time, but always having in his head what his ultimate goal is. So everything is about that idea of home and of family and of his marriage, of like being the man and
playing that role.
Exactly. Yeah. The things that are coming to oppose that, he just has to deal with one at a time. And often it's about not dealing with it. Even once his, hand is shaking and he's not able to sew, one of the first things that he does after realizing that at the dinner table is offer to sew up Kate's jacket, because it's this need to prove to himself that he can do it. And when he can't, what's he left with? And that's continually the kind of thing that he is confronted with. He goes to work for Kate, and then that ends up getting, smacked in his face, and he ends up back at home again. And, that was a really intriguing time, because that's where a lot of the lies back and forth between him and Marion lay. And I think that's some of his learning from his wife, even. And the way that Marion and Teddy are able to be on the same page by lying to each other gives you a hint at maybe why they were first attracted to each other. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's really about playing it one moment at a time, so that the severity of each of those things grows throughout the course of the film.
It's like a pressure cooker.
It is, sorts. Yeah.
It's like this idea of just like upholding this thing, this societal norm, like this, pressure to fit this role can be so destructive.
Absolutely, because that's again the benefit of working in a time period is, and such an isolated culture, is he has absolutely no reference for a life that's different from the one he had lived before the war, of just like having a small business, living and working with his wife, and just being the man of the house who's in charge of the finances and the business and just the home making part of it. So as these things are kind of being taken away from him, he has no idea how to grapple with it. And that's something that, as an actor, I tend to gravitate more towards characters who are really goal oriented. So it was really interesting challenge to play someone who is that goal oriented, but absolutely everything they're grabbing onto is getting taken away from them.
Yeah.
Chad? Chad, I want to ask you, now you're watching Colin acting in the film or you're editing, but probably someone else, maybe next to Colin, of course, attracted your attention and you found yourself following the performance or even following the scenes. Who else shown to you? Like you realized, wow, what am I editing? What is this?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, there was God. It was one of the earlier scenes that we did. It was one of the first days. And it was this the kind of the fun thing about editing a film that does have so many like one takes. Was it's like it's a good morale boost when you're starting to edit. You're like, all right, buckle up. I'm gonna edit a feature film. We're like, oh, well, this one's done. Sort of.
Yes.
Picture locked. I selected this take. Um, One of the first days that we shot was we shot first for 3 days in New York, and one of those first days was all of Peggy's house stuff.
Yes.
And it was the scene with Marion and Peggy where Marion goes to her, it's at night, and she says, oh, just sew this for me and work from home, like basically like you're my dirty little secret. And it's such a heartbreaking scene.
Yes.
And that was one of the first big one takes we did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't initially supposed to be a one take. It was supposed to have more coverage. But then we were watching the performances and we were like, let's just keep it as is, because it's so I love just like how they work off each other. And I was, in like sound mode on set and like helping produce. So I was watching on set, we were falling in love with the take. We also never know when you fall in love with something on set if you're going to watch it back and go, actually it's this other take, because it's just all whatever works in the story. But that is one that the take on set was the take that we selected and it never changed. And I remember watching that in the editing room with Colin, and I was just like jaw drop, just how much baggage each character was bringing to this seemingly very simple conversation. Some of these conversations are just like, oh, well, you saw this for me, sure, but what the actors brought to it's like stepping on set and seeing someone say like, where's the lamp, and they're like, over there. I'm like, oh my god. I was like, did I read the same script? I was like, that's god, the subtext in every scene was just so chilling at times. And I think it was like that was like one of the first scenes we shot. It was the two of them talking about the blouse and like, why don't you like sew this for me? And I just remember on set being like, oh my god, like these actors are bringing it. And that was just like because you have to have that like sigh of relief when you're working on something. Hopefully you get that sigh of relief at one point. You're like, oh, this is gonna work great. And that was pretty early on, so I was happy about that.
Okay, so my final questions, okay, with an S. There is usually a difficult scene where, to me, the average viewer, oh my God, someone is walking through the door. But to you both, it was like, this scene finally ended. I can't believe how difficult it was. It could be like a normal, boring dialogue scene, someone walking through a door, opening a door, whatever. So I want to know the most difficult scene, both of your perspectives, but to me, it could be like any scene.
I love that question.
Do you know your answer?
I'm going to think about it in terms of editing. I'm going to think difficult scene to edit. If you have yours come up, you go first. There's
a couple. I'm trying to think. That
might help jog my memory too. If you,
okay, I would say.
Oh, I have one.
But okay, no, you go ahead then.
I would say this. It's actually not an editing one. This is more just a logistics of filming.
Okay.
That final, I'll talk about the final scene.
Yeah.
The final scene with Teddy and Marion on the mountainside with that beautiful vista. That like almost didn't happen a bunch of times because like it was scheduled for the day before, and we went out to film it. But the place that we initially wanted to film it had so many tourists with selfie sticks taking pictures, and we were not about to shoot this very like heartbreaking scene in front of all these tourists. And just like, that's part of the how to make actors comfortable is not to put them in that situation. So we were like, well, we'll just have to get it the next day. We'll come back. And we were filming a lot that day, and we were kind of running behind a little bit. And the sun, it's all dependent on the sun. and the sun was starting to go down. We're like, oh my goodness, how are we going to get this? So what we actually did was, and Aidan did an incredible job of like matching this. We actually shot the front of them in like the backyard of the cabin, because there's like a kind of like a downward slope behind them. So that was just like looking off at just the river of the cabin in the woods, basically. That was from the front of them. And then we just like, and then we're like, well, we got to find a vista for the back shot, you know, for behind them. So we just like, we're going and we just stumbled upon one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. And everyone, I think, likes to say that in movies, like, oh, and then the clouds parted. But I do want to say it. I've never before or after seen a sunset so pretty in my entire life.
Yeah.
And we were like driving away, like, oh, this is great. This will work. And then we just shot them, you know, the wide of them from behind and the close of them from behind them facing the lookout. And it matched up perfectly. And you would never know that those were shot at two different areas. And I just, that it's always like the simple things that is like always so exciting when you're editing too. I'll take it to the edit. When I like mashed it up, I was like, movie making, like, they're not, you know, you edit a bunch of movies, but still that kind of more simple stuff is like some of the most exciting to look at.
Okay.
Colin.
I think for me, it was one that, because I tried to like keep in the schedule some open time for the last couple days in case there was anything that needed reshoots or blah, 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 needed to be kicked back. And so a scene that kept getting kicked back was the scene between Teddy, Marion, and Kate when they're having drinks at the window right after that river scene. So in the script, and this goes back to, you know, fall in love with something, what something means and not, you know, the way you want it. Because in the script, that takes place on Kate's farm. And we just weren't quite able to secure that location at a time that would have worked for us. So we were thinking about how to do it and a really effective way to showcase that dynamic between the three of them in that moment in time, because Marion and Teddy really want to keep playing happy couple. And there's, you know, this thing that just happened that day at the river that is very much, you know, the elephant in the room between them. And then there's Kate, who is the one always pushing them together. But at the same time has her own kind of like envy of what she thinks is their marriage and of Teddy as a husband. So I wanted to find a way to just kind of like sit in those feelings. And thinking about the river scene, which we'd already shot, and how kinetic I knew that was going to be, I figured the best way to sit in their discomfort would be to just like sit in their discomfort. And that was like an idea that really only occurred to me the day that we shot it, really. And just knowing like, well, this has to be shot today. And I don't really know like how this is going to be done. And then really just finding that window and then, you know, having the wall literally between Marion and Teddy, to me was the big key of that scene, because it really does make him, you know, thinking again about playing Teddy and all those, to me, the key of that character lied in the dissonance between what he wants from his life versus what his life really is. I mean, he's literally man of the house and he's outside right now, like having to talk to these people through a window. There's a physical barrier. That's something that ended up being really, really, really exciting to me, especially watching the footage back, going from a scene that's so kinetic, full of like so many shots and so many cuts, to then just like sitting in the discomfort of these people as they're trying to put together the pieces of their life was really exciting to me.
Yeah.
Definitely. Teddy, Marion, and the Appalachian Mountains between them. Chad and Colin, thank you so much for talking to me. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Today I have three amazing actresses from one of my really most enjoyable films that I watched recently, Appalachian Dog. I have actresses Georgia Morgan, Hayleigh Hart Franklin, and Brooke Elizabeth playing the three strong female leads of this gothic, drama that is filled with sexual tension, intense feelings, emotional pull and push, everything you could imagine. So you can imagine my excitement, especially watching all these amazing, beautiful ladies playing strong women from a very different time. So first of all, thank you all for talking to me.
Of course. Thank you so much for bringing us on. This is really amazing to be here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Very excited.
Thank you. What I want to know from each one of you, how did you approach this project? How did the project come to you?
Well, I don't know who wants to start, but we all actually went to school together. We all graduated from SUNY Purchase, and in different grades and different years and studies, and had the pleasure of kind of falling in love with each other there in different regards, and then we're lucky to know Colin Henning, who wrote the script for this and casted all of us, I think, and wrote all of us with, wrote these characters with us in mind, which was, yeah, I feel so grateful for that. I don't know.
Yeah, we're a pretty tight-knit group of friends, collaborators, artistic people working together. And yeah, I think getting started in this film, I know that this was something Colin had been working on for a long time. He's always got a lot of different projects running. And again, like Hayleigh said, we're so lucky that he uses, his friends and the people that he loves in his lives as inspiration for the different works that he creates. So it really started back in school, collaborating with him in different ways. I know I talked to Colin years ago about this film and starting this film, and I'm also from North Carolina, so we both draw a lot of it, a lot of inspiration from our lives there, history that we know from North Carolina. And it Colin is so excellent at just getting everybody together and just going. And that's exactly what we did with this project.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they pretty much summed it up. I mean, yeah, I was given the script by Colin. I read it kind of early on, and I didn't know at the time that he had part for me in it. So when I found out, I mean, I was just beyond thrilled. And yeah, I mean, we all know each other. We're all friends. And I mean, it's just fell in love with the script. He's such an incredible writer. And yeah, very lucky.
Okay, Georgia, what I adore about Marion is the different
Yeah.
relationships she has. First with Kate and then with Peggy. It's completely different. I feel like the relationship with Kate is kind of competitive, antagonistic in a way, but it's also there is underlying love. But the thing that she has with Peggy is really different and emotionally layered. So how did you approach her? She's a very complex character and has many transitions.
Yeah, she really is. God, I get emotional every time I talk about her. Um, because, she is a very complicated person, and I think that she represents so much of what it is to be a Southern woman, even now, and I think that translates to a lot of other cultures as well. What it is to be a person who is so driven, wants so much, but truly just really has this difficult time being honest with herself, and learning what it is to take down the mask. And I think a lot of us can relate to the fact that just like Marion, so much of us are willing to really drive forth with action and with really, really trying to make things happen. But it's very easy to realize that you've lost the reason why along the way. I don't think that Marion ever means to lie. I don't think she ever means to manipulate. And the fact that she does end up doing this to some of the closest women in her life, to Teddy, to everybody, because of love and because of longing, is just such a tragic thing. And I love that you understand the fact that she has so much love for Kate. I love the relationship between each person. And I think it's very clear between me and Peggy, of what that relationship is and all the unspokens with that relationship. But I also love the fact that there's a deep, deep kind of almost sisterly intimacy with Kate, where she's kind of the person I drop my mask around the most. I'm like, she's the only one who I really huff and be angry and frustrated around, and I show her true sides more so than almost any of the other people in the film. So I love that you also see the love that's there, even through the frustration, even through the like, oh, Kate, it's all there.
And what I love Hayleigh about Peggy, I think she emotionally suppresses a lot. You can tell there is a lot that Peggy has. You can tell that Peggy is this brilliant genius, unfortunately, with no path for her genius to come to fruition. And maybe this is something that a lot of us have found because of our gender, because of our place in the world. So I really connected to her. So her love with Marion, her love for her craft was kind of burdened. So I don't know how you approached her and her relationship with the people around her, and also with her talent, which I feel like she kind of suppresses.
Hmm. Thank you. With Peggy, I found that, holding on to the kind of this idea that she really, really just wants to do right by her mother, by God. Like I say that as her early on in the film. And so with that as like a guiding force for everything else, it's like I have that gift because of because God gave it to me. And even there's, a part of it where I'm singing and as Peggy, and and I say, it's because of God. Marion like wants to give it to me as a talent of mine, but it's something that I say is there because of him. And I think that helped helped me find her a lot. Like it gave me something to hold on to, and then use as uh, a movement for everything else, as why I have to tell the truth at the end and why I have to hold on to things so tightly, until I can't, until she can't.
Yes, all her defenses are down. Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Brooke. Kate is, for me, I love her because she's kind of brash. She's kind of outspoken. She's in your face a bit. She holds the threads. She kind of controls the little things. But you can see her grasping for survival. And also sometimes it's as if her world is crumbling, but she really maintains at least this image of control. And she kind of like has this special relationship with Teddy, with Marion. How did you approach her?
I mean, everything that you said, you just really hit, like, nailed it. I mean, for Kate, I mean, I love her so much, and you're right. She does kind of, she sees through things, but she keeps it to herself because she is in a mode of survival. And I mean, for me, approaching her, I really did focus a lot on the relationships with her and Marion specifically, because I mean that's the crux, that's the foundation of everything. But then I also really explored a lot of different things with what exactly is this relationship that she develops with Teddy, like this new thing that comes along. It's I mean, it's like she's kind of living vicariously in a way through this relationship. But is there something more? Is it the longing? Is it this connection that she feels with him that she doesn't even really know what it is? But yeah, I mean, I really focused on her relationships with those two specific people. And then the underlying part of it was she's in survival mode, and she has this big secret that she can't reveal. And she's completely by herself. I mean, I think it's the saddest thing, how lonely she really is. And I mean, even though I feel like we leave the movie kind of seeing her just in the lowest point she's ever been in her life, you do get the sense that she's still going to be okay. She's still going to continue having a relationship with Marion. And because I mean, that's just how living in that small town during that time, I mean, your options are very limited. So, but yeah, I love her. And she is kind of, she's brash with a little Southern hospitality put on it, which I loved exploring that.
Very
Yeah.
delicious female characters, seriously. What I want to ask you, because I asked Colin and also Chad about the commentary of the film on traditional masculinity and the facade that it creates. So I want to ask you, how did you see its commentary on women? Because there were multifaceted ways of talking about women. We had a lot of women not speaking and then acting like different from how they actually felt. Womanhood plays a huge part in this film. It's the meat of the film. So how did you see the commentary of the film on the feminine experience in general?
I think, yeah, we've discussed this a lot, but I think Georgia, you should. I mean,
Yeah.
coming from North Carolina, you've talked a lot about how that, you know, relationship with womanhood is specific.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it,
Yeah, I think, for me, yeah, so much of this film touches on how we believe that we need to come across, how we believe that we need to mask versus who we actually are. And these people that I'm with in the film, they are the closest people to me in my life. And I still feel no ability as Marion to be open with them, to be open with Peggy, and I think that so much of that is sort of made into a metaphor of the time period. Why is this set in isolated Appalachian mountains in the 1940s post-war? Why? And a big part of that is to highlight the lack of options that these women have, and that all of these actions that they're taking, all of these coverings that they have are for survival. If I am honest with Peggy and I lose her because of that, it would be the most devastating blow in my life. I could not continue to go on living, and I think that such a good metaphor of putting these women in this time period where they really can't act on that, because it highlights the fact that that's how it feels for women now a lot of the time too. It feels as though I can't bring forth this true self, you know, but we can now, in a lot of ways that we can't then. And I love the fact that, womanhood in this, it shows so many different relationships between these women, and how different female relationships can look to between each other, and a call to action of being honest, and that there's a lot to lose from not being honest, more so than hiding it. um yeah, and I'll say one more thing, just again with that masking, and with, there's a lot of pressure for women to be on, and to be, have it all together, and to never show weakness. But, the vulnerability of being honest is extremely important.
One of the things that I really enjoyed in this film, and I was talking to Aidan, the cinematographer, the idea that the camera can be so close to you actors, because we were like fascinated by all the three of you. And then you could forget that it was there. And there was a particular scene between Marion and Peggy where it was so close. And Aiden told me it was like inches. And you were so immersed in the scene. And we couldn't even imagine, like, how do actors forget the presence of all this props and all this equipment? And they just give it all. So I want to ask you, do you all have theater backgrounds?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so is this it? Is this it? I want to know, because we are so curious. Like Aiden and I were gushing about you. So we were just like, wow, I can't believe how actors do this. How do they get lost in the moment? So I want to ask you, how do you do this?
That's such a good question. I'll say for myself, like, I mean, it's the fun of when you have a really great character, when the writing is good, it makes it so much easier to kind of immerse yourself in who that person is. And the more that, like, I fell in love with Peggy, and understanding what she wants, what she needs, that was more important than any of the technical stuff going on, around us in real life. It was more important that that I had to fight for what Peggy wanted. And so it kind of makes everything yeah, it makes the imagination stronger the more you know your characters, you know.
Yeah, and from a technical aspect, and when I say technical, technical from the craft of acting, two things. One, I've worked with both of these women before, and I've worked with Colin before. Hayleigh and Colin, I've worked with for years. We've done Shakespeare together. We've done like heightened language together. We've done so much theater together. So that was a gift technically of when I hone into looking into Hayleigh's eyes. There's so much history between us as actresses, as well as us as, you know, Marion and Peggy. And so you can really rely on that genuine heart and connection. So that's one technical element that I think just eases the ability to focus. And the second thing is focus and what that is. I think every acting class we all go to, there's always the nerves. There's always the, oh my God, there's a giant eye, a lens, a camera right next to me looking at me. But the brain is only able to focus on so many things. So the more detail, the more specifics that you throw yourself into as an actor, you know, Peggy's face, her eyes, her beauty, who she is to me, all of those things, you can't help but get lost in it, and just everything else fades to the side. So that's something that constantly comes up in like the craft of acting, of how to support yourself when those outside forces try to come into your world you're creating.
Yeah. Yeah. And to just kind of piggyback off that real quick, I think that each of us you just have to do the work, you know? And when you have such an incredible script and such an incredible character, you bring whatever tools you learn. Cause like we each kind of have like our own process, but like when we came together, it was that trust. We just all really just trusted each other so much. And Colin trusted us each to do the work and to come to play, and also being in the environment that we were in and shooting on the location just, I mean, helped. It was like butter once we got there, you know. I mean, you can't help but become immersed.
Yeah, I just have to add to that just because I forgot to mention just Colin, you know, that house we were in the environment. We were really, you know, the sewing needles were there. We had the dresses on the stand. There were so many details that we didn't have to imagine that it made it very easy to just forget that there's a camera, you know, because everything else was so alive and literally real. You know, we could touch it.
Yep.
One of the things that I loved about Marion and Kate, the antagonism sometimes, and then the friendship that engulfs them. There is a scene where they're like bantering, you know, it's like back and forth talking, you know, like you have lipstick on you, you have what? It was amazing, and there was Teddy in the middle, and then there was another scene where they were sitting next to each other, and there is a window, and Teddy is behind the window, so you could see that the separation is Teddy. How did you both, Georgia and Brooke, work on these scenes together, which are like different? There are scenes where you're just the best of friends, gossiping and having fun, and then there are scenes where you're like, there's a rivalry between both of you.
Yeah.
Brooke, I'll let you take this one, but before you do, I just have to say, we're always cast in these in an antagonistic roles with each. We're always cast
Yep.
where like this always happens. So
Yeah.
again, we had the warm up of being cast in the past as having these like antagonistic forces. So
Yep.
yeah, that was definitely one element that I'll add. But Brooke, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was gonna say the same thing too, is that we had worked on another film before where we literally are just back and forth. There's so much tension there. I mean, I think that it came very easy, kind of going from what we had spoken about earlier, where we both just like we did the work, we understood the characters, we trusted each other. But the specific scene that you mentioned, the window scene, it's one of my favorite scenes. And we shot it kind
Me
of
too.
early on. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. And we shot it kind of early on, and we spent a lot of time of it. And I remember we just had so much fun with it. And it wasn't, I believe that the way it was blocked was that it wasn't, they had never intended for it to be blocked that way. Am I right, Georgia?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it was kind of like in the moment, like, okay, we're going to do it this way. And we're like, oh, okay, all right, this is fun. Like, they're drinking moonshine. But yeah, you're right. Teddy is the one who's in the background who ends up being the one who kind of like comes in the middle of them, so to speak. But yeah, they're kind of, it's like, they sort of feel like it's like a big sister, little sister relationship at times. And I remember talking to Colin about
who's the big sister, huh?
Who's the big sister? I don't know. Well, I had to talk to Colin about it, and he said that I am, of course. Yeah. But yeah, it's very like a sisterly relationship that just because of these underlying things going on, they kind of just they go through a thing. But I love their relationship. It was so much fun.
Yeah, and I remember a conversation that you and I had early on about our relationship, because it's one that is so interesting and a little less straightforward than some of the other relationships. And we had a conversation early on about the fact that of the work that we did was really history work. What is it like to grow up in this isolated town where this is your friend, this is your childhood friend?
Yeah.
She's always there. She's always been the same. She's always been like, yeah, okay, but she is always there. And again, going back to, she is the one, weirdly enough, that Marion can be the most herself around and the most frustrated around. And those kinds of people are special in your life, when you actually have people who they've known you since birth.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Yep.
My question to all of you. I always ask this question, and usually the answers vary. There is usually a scene where it seems to me, the average viewer, as a very, very easy scene. But for the actor, it's like a nightmare. It's the most difficult scene they ever shot. So I want to know, on this particular film, what was the most difficult scene that you shot? And probably to me, it would be like a dialogue scene. Like, probably I would imagine it's a fight scene, or a scene where Marion is like on the stream, or Peggy is having to suppress all her emotions. But probably it's just a dialogue scene, or a scene that you have to repeat a lot. So I don't know, each one of you, if you have a scene like that. It's just so difficult to shoot, but probably for me, I was like, okay, no, I think it's another one.
I'll go. I'm like, what's coming to mind right now is really was like a simple scene, or like a very fun scene in the movie, and it was fun to do, but in trying to have those dialects down pat, like I had such trouble saying Claudette, and it's the name of a character. I just needed to say it Claudette instead of Claudette, but I had such trouble saying it. So there's a scene just between Marion and I early on in the film where we're like, talking about the dress for her. And it's a very fun scene, but I struggled getting that one name right.
I had forgotten about that. That was so true. I was having trouble too. We were like, wait, what?
How do you say it?
Yeah, that was great. I know for me, it was without a doubt 100% the river scene. Not for the reasons you would probably think.
Okay.
So when I say it, and this is the whole thing of like movie magic. So when we filmed that scene, it was, we're already a skeleton crew, but it was ultra skeleton. It was me, Colin, and Aidan. And so the area that we found that we were going to film in, there was no flat area next to the river. So when I tell you, I was doing the entire scene like hanging onto a root to not fall into the icy water.
Whoa.
So
Okay.
first of all, and like the hoops I was jumping through to just like not fall into the water. And Colin was like, "Is this okay? Or can we do this here? Do we?" And I was like, "No, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it." And I was so focused that the moment when Teddy goes in to kiss Marion, I was so focused at first. I think he kissed me 3 times. He's like, "You're supposed to stop me." I'm like, I know. I'm just trying to figure this out. So that, and just, I was sliding, he was sliding, Aidan was trying to keep us from falling in the river. And so I reach over to grab the glasses. We've got the shot going, and I can't break them with my single hand. It's just one of those things where you don't even think about these things. Like, okay, I'm gonna snap the glasses now. And I was just like, I can't do it.
Can't be
So from
broke.
a technical standpoint, that scene was insane. We were all laughing so much, which I think also made everything kind of like loosen up and just be able to flow, and it was oddly a really nicely difficult scene to technically pull off that I think helped a lot. So that's mine.
I would have thought because this scene seemed complicated, but the idea that you described, I never thought it was that complicated. I never thought it was that particular issue. This is so much
It's
fun.
always the technical things that'll suddenly get you. You're like, you've done all this work on the artistic side, and then all of a sudden the technical stuff, you're like, oh.
Yeah. For me, just what Georgia said about like the technical stuff, and this is gonna sound a little like I don't know crazy, but when we were filming the scene with me and Teddy in the barn, when Kate kind of starts to talk a little bit about her husband after Teddy sees him from afar, the raking, the raking of that hay, I could not. I started like freaking out because we didn't really rehearse it. It was just, and also that scene was supposed to be shot at a different area. And then they decided to shoot it in the barn. And I mean, that hay was hard to rake. I was just like, why can I not? I don't know how to rake. I don't know how to rake. Hey, I'm a farmer. What's going on? Like, yeah, I remember that was like, yeah, that was a little tough for me. That just sticks out as the thing. The hay.
It's usually the scenes that you see fleetingly that really result in the actors going through a lot of wow. I would never imagine that. Okay, so
Yeah.
what I want you to just tell me as to finalize everything, does Kate have something to say about Marion and Peggy? And does Marion have anything to say about Peggy and Kate? I want to know each character, what she would say like about the other character. And do you think that Kate has seen all the characters the same way that Marion has? Because I feel like Marion has seen the whole map. Kate probably was on the sidelines a little bit. Maybe Peggy was on, but it was usually revolving around Marion a little bit. So I want to know your opinion. Like, what would Kate say about her two female, like co-star, but not co-stars, like this heroes of this story. And same goes for
Yeah.
Marion.
Mm.
Ooh. I think that I mean, Kate loves Marion, but I think that she becomes they both become lost, but in their own ways, and they're both, it's influencing each other. But I think that she kind of sees right through what's going on, and I think that like in that scene with us on the hill, when we finally kind of confront each other, so to speak, when everything's kind of, the veil's coming off, there's just like this disappointment, this she's a little crushed by what's happening, but there's also guilt too. I think that there's guilt with both Kate and Marion between each other. Yeah. And I think in terms of how Kate views Peggy, I mean, that was something that was kind of, it's very interesting because she does sort of, she kind of isn't really, she's not like, I don't know, she's a little indifferent with Peggy. Yeah, I'm curious as to hear
Me too.
Wow. What do you think, ladies?
Yeah, I know for me, thinking about the way I view each of you in the film, I think that my favorite scene in the film is the one between me and Kate, between Marion and Kate.
Yeah.
That film that scene just crushes me every single time I watch it. And I think it's that moment whenever you have these people in your life that you take for granted. You just assume they're always going to be there. They frustrate you, but they're family and whatever. And I think it was the first time, maybe in a long time, maybe ever, that I saw Kate truly with the mask down,
Mm.
truly saying, "This is what I want, this is what I need, and I'm not getting it, and I'm not okay." I think she does, and it takes that huge of a gesture for Marion to be able to truly see her. She does this awful, wet, soul-sucking kiss, that is everything that is the opposite of what a kiss is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And looking at her after, it's like I'm looking at an alien. I don't know who this woman is in front of me.
Mhm.
And the pain and the guilt that I feel of, I'm over there saying, yeah, I have Teddy, I have Peggy, I still see her, I'm with him, everything's good. I have everything. And that's what
Mhm.
I wanted. And I'm still not happy. And it's just so painful. It's my favorite scene. And I think I'm so curious after all the pieces fall where they are. I agree. We'll be friends. We'll be around each other. We'll patch it up. We'll keep moving on. But there's something fundamentally different about our relationship, or there will be moving forward. And as for how Marion sees Peggy, I think, for both of them, they see a realer side of Marion than she allows to be with Teddy, because I think Teddy is a vision of a dream of the past. It is a vision of upholding what I thought I was supposed to be and supposed to accomplish. But um with Peggy, well, with Kate, she sees the real me of the frustration, the anger, the I'm a mess, I feel horrible. Why is this not working out? What do I do? But with Peggy, like, she's just this angel, and she's just this person who truly lifts me up to be able to be the best version of myself. And she holds me to that to the very end. When she says, I love you, but I cannot be with you when you are like this. She holds me to a standard, a higher standard than anybody else, and a standard that Marion can live up to, but all her weaknesses got the best of her. So I think Peggy, in a huge way, is a hero, and is this angel, this guiding force in my life that, again, I take for granted in the midst of all this action and trying to make everything work out the way that I want to. And that's why I lose her, because I'm not living up to the dignity of who she knows I can be.
Yeah, I think for Peggy, it's with Marion, she's, I think, set in these times, it's like, as a Black woman in Appalachia, people, there was more racial, I think, mixing than we might have, like, we might think about in for our history. But it's still, I'm very aware that I'm a Black woman within that space. And so Marion is sort of a breath of fresh air in some ways, because she sees Peggy as a full person. And I don't think just for, she not without skin in mind, and I think, like, as a juxtaposition, I feel that with, that awareness of difference with Kate, and so it's easy to fall in love with Marion, and I think that's what part of what's so wonderful about her. And then I just, Peggy has to, because she upholds the truth, and as I said at the beginning, like, her love for God, and that is truth. She can't go on with Marion, as Georgia said.
That's what
At
I
the
love
end.
about Peggy. I feel like Peggy is a very level-headed. She's a really honest woman. And I mean, like, you can see how Marion and Kate kind of like manipulate the but Peggy's like, this is the truth. This is what I have. This is what I own. This is what I owe to God, So it makes total sense, the dynamics between those three women and those three characters based on their individual and very specific and very unique personalities. I mean, I just had the best conversation with you. I hope I didn't wear you out with my questions, but seriously, I can't have enough because you're three amazing, talented women, and I'm just honored to talk to the three of you. Seriously.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I know it like warms my heart to hear someone else, because a lot of the people who we've talked to so far have been friends and things like that, but to hear someone we're just now meeting understand and speak back to us so much of what we worked on is like really, really like just life affirming and art affirming. It's really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
all
Yeah.
so much.
it's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Such a pleasure. And thank you for those questions. And yeah, it's been great. Thank
It's,
you.
it's been great. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to talk to Aidan Macaluso about great cinematographer about this amazing film that I watched, The Appalachian Dog. I talked to the director and the editor already, and I have a lot to talk about because this film really, really kept me thinking and wondering and enjoying the scenery in front of me. It was like a gothic tale of love and sexual tension and hidden desire. So, Aidan, very happy to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to talk too. Appreciate it.
How did you get your hands on this project? How did it come to you?
Pretty naturally, honestly. I was in a film program with Chad, and we were pretty close collaborators in school. I shot some of his work, and yeah, we worked together a lot. We were roommates senior year, so we bonded creatively a lot. We just stayed in touch, and then I think about yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact timeline because it's been a couple years since we shot the movie. Yeah, about 2.5 years ago, Chad reached out to me to shoot one of his short films, and that was kind of happened in conjunction with pre-production for Appalachian Dog. So we just kind of had like project back to back, which was really fun. But it was a really quick turnaround. I think we started shooting. I think they asked me in the fall of uh, what year is this? 2025. Whatever year it was. They asked me in the fall, and then that following winter, that final following January is when we started. And so it was a really quick process. Yeah.
Okay, enlighten me. When you, as a
hmm
cinematographer, you have the script in your hand, what is the first thing that comes to mind, especially a layered script like that?
hmm in just in general, or this one in particular?
Well, okay, because I really love the craft, I love cinematography, and I really love
Yeah.
to know more about it. But okay, start generally and then come to this project because I feel like, okay, I want to know how you see things visually because I know I've talked to a lot of directors, a lot of actors, but you as a cinematographer, how does the visual language speak to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different script to script because there's a lot of um, you know, different writers write differently. That's obvious. I mean, there are some writers are very economical with their writing and aren't very flowery. Yeah, then there are other writers that have uh, are more prose like. I think Colin and they both kind of create very different reading experiences. I don't have a preference necessarily. I think I when I'm writing, I prefer to be a little bit more sparse. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Colin's writing is he comes from a theater background too. Um, and so I think his screenwriting is more in line with playwriting than the normal screenwriter. So it is very economical. It's very sparse. And I do like those types of scripts. They read quickly, but sometimes there's a little bit more of a conversation that needs to happen around what the writer director wants it to look like. And yeah, I don't know. The first time I read it, it's really just story. It's really story. I'm trying to absorb as much as I can, um, and then I'll reread it and try to imagine it a bit more visually. But I I don't know. Of course, there's always like a initial movie that's playing out in my head, but I like to not get too far ahead of myself until I like read the script and talk to the director to figure out what they're imagining for it. I kind of it was reading this one in particular though. I had my suspicions about what it would look like, and so I think I actually knowing them, knowing their work, working with both of them, both Chad and Colin in the past, and knowing Colin's background in theater, um, the script is very play-like. There's a lot of scenes that play out in long takes in one location. It's very dialogue heavy. It's very character heavy. Um, and so I kind of had an idea, or just I suspected what I had my suspicions of what it would look like. And I think I'm not, I think this is a testament both to the writing and both to how the Colin's precision as a director that it did kind of end up looking very similar to how I read it on the page, at least the first, or at least this by the second or third time reading it. Yeah.
So the lighting, especially in the indoor scenes, how did you
Mhm.
achieve this look?
Oh, well, so we had like a thing that was both a challenge and was very fun with the project is that we had very little resources. We shot uh, in North Carolina, and we have, I have my own handful of personal resources, and we're all local to New York City. Um, but you know, flying on a small airplane where we're not shipping any gear over. We're just taking whatever we can fit onto basically a carry-on. Um, is a massive challenge, and I remember talking to them about this. We had a lot of discussions about what the look is going to be, um, and fortunately, we actually had a shoot day, one or two shoot days in New York first. So that kind of helped establish the look, where we did have a little bit more resources. And then the conversations that came after that were like, okay, like how do we achieve this with a little bit less in a different state? Um, and it's hard. I think we tried to rely. They were like, we don't have any lights, and I'm like, okay, cool. We need. I have like this small, very small package of these LED tube lights. Um, they're called quasars. They're very versatile, but they are not that powerful. And they're battery operated. But they're great because they're magnetic. You can mount them in different places and hide them and whatnot. And I was like, okay, can we please just bring these? And um, they were down for that. We could fit them. They're pretty small, so we were able to fit them into some luggage. But that's literally all we had. We had those three tiny little tube lights, and so I was just trying to, find creative ways to um, use them to motivate different sources. So we were using a lot of as much window light as possible, as much natural light as possible, as many practical lights that were being used diegetically in the scene. So lamps, overhead lights, stuff like that, candlelight. And then, yeah, I mean, beyond that, I would just try to add these like soft accent lights wherever I could. But we leaned heavily on the environment, and which kind of, was wrapped up in helping decide the blocking and where we were going to shoot the scene indoors. And yeah, so it was a lot of creative problem solving. And but I think that often helps.
Totally shows off. Seriously. Okay, some of those shots were amazing. There's amazing close-ups, like on the lake or by the stream where it's like Georgia and Colin as,
Yes.
Marion and Todd just
Hmm.
together. I want to know, how did you establish this shot? Because this scene in particular kind of like spoke to me. It was as if the camera, like, how is the camera placed and you have the actress's face full showing us and everything is there. How do you establish this communication with the actor when you have the camera so close and then you take your particular shot? And how do you decide on the final shot? Like you shoot this scene and it's amazing and it's by the stream and it was a very empowering, intimate scene too. How did you decide on finally the final shot of the face?
Final shot of that scene, not the film you're talking about, of that
Yes.
scene in particular. Um, it's really, I again, like I think it's um, sometimes you're just lucky, and I think um, working with uh, Colin and Georgia in that scene, they have such a close, intimate working relationship. They both went to, um, they were both in an acting program together, and I think that they have just developed a shorthand and a language together that really made it easy to, you know, find whatever we were looking for. And I think my job in those moments is to recognize my place in that creative dynamic and to just take a bit of a step back at first and watch them work and communicate and ultimately have them find what feels right for the scene. And as I'm watching that, I'm kind of just, the visuals come fairly naturally. I mean, it's a really beautiful um, environment that we were shooting in. We're on this like icy creek, and it's just there's so much poetry to the background in that scene, to just the flowing water right rushing past her head, and in this very emotionally confusing moment for her. It's just like,
Even
they're just like, you go what?
breaking the glasses, even breaking the glasses, like every single element in this scene is just seriously like poetry, but also very symbolic of certain things. So it definitely adds up, every single element.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I mean, when, I mean, that's the writing too. That's the writing, that's the directing. And you have these two actors who are just wildly comfortable with each other. And one of which is the director. And it's just like, you know, the framing just comes so naturally for a scene that's so you know, so well conceived. Yeah.
But personally, as Aiden, what do you prefer? A limited budget with creative solutions and where you work your brain maybe too much, but it just makes you, I think, have more liberty, or like an unlimited budget where you feel like, okay, I'm doing minimal work and I'm just sitting there, but there is not a lot where your mind is working. Which do you prefer?
I've never had that second one, so I have no idea.
Okay, manifesting, manifesting, it will happen. But then
I
who
would
wouldn't?
imagine, I know, right? Of course. I would imagine that I would like, boring answer, just a nice blend of the two of them. Like I don't love the idea of just sitting back and, letting other people do all the work for me, obviously. But there is a middle ground of like having a little bit more resources, still with some limitations, or honestly, like creating limitate like regardless, I think that if I were to be going into a project with a slightly bigger scope, I still think that putting the limitations in place yourself is still a good idea. Um, um, just because those, so much is born out of those restraints. And when it's so open-ended and you just have all the resources in the world, then like I don't know. I think I would flail under that a little bit. So um yeah, I think the only upgrade that I would, you know, really I think I would really benefit from is just um one or two other people, just
Yes.
to share that hey, like the physical workload with, but also just to like bounce those ideas off of. Um, I think that is really helpful just to like be in dialogue about what the lighting plan could look like. Um, but Yeah, sorry, that was a roundabout answer to not really even answer your question, I think. But
I really like what you're saying. It's actually more real. I just love it when it's the words are flowing and we're bouncing off ideas.
yeah.
I just like it more,
Yeah. Good,
honestly.
good.
Seems like a very honest
Okay.
answer too. I love it so much.
Okay, good.
Okay, because I will just keep questioning about some of my favorite scenes. There's this scene
Mhm.
between Georgia and you have Hayleigh, and it's a very long
Mhm.
take, and they're together, and then there's almost a kiss, and they're like talking about, like it's very intense scene, and some of their scenes are
Uh-huh.
very beautiful, and they're both in the frame. For me, it felt like sometimes the frame was forcing them together, kind of, they're trapped within the
Mhm.
scene. So, how do you see it behind the camera? Do you feel the intensity? Does it impact you the same way, or do you not get lost in the beauty of the scene because you can see everything around you? Because a scene like that, I was like silent and waiting, and there were many silent moments. Their eyes were just doing the talking, and the camera was so close. They seemed so trapped together.
Yeah, are you talking about you're talking about the scene where the two of them are in the by the in the living room of the fireplace looking at the
Yes,
dress and then
yes, yes, yes,
Georgia suggests that they share a glass of wine. Is that's the scene
yes.
you're talking about? Yeah, no. I mean that um I think again it's a mix. But like the uh, there are some scenes that are so where let's say like there's a that are just a bit more technically difficult to achieve and do well. So like if there's like some difficult blocking or camera movement or something like that, um, it is harder for me to lose myself in what's happening in the scene, of course, because I'm so focused on a very technical side of things. Um, that scene, that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. As I really love that scene because I think I think the blocking is deceptively um, complex. Like it, or maybe deceptive. Yeah, it's very simple, but like it's achieving a very complex thing, and it is a very long take, and so much is happening in this two shot. And then once Georgia exits frame, and you see her in the background, and you're just left there with Hayleigh, um, and it becomes a single shot, and then it becomes a two shot again. There's just these like shifting. It's very unique to witness such long. I wouldn't even really call it a power dynamic. It's just like because I don't really know. I wouldn't say one or the other one really has there's not like shifting power in that moment. It's more just like, but it's the emotions are so trackable, I think. And like there is an arc. There is a very clear arc to it. It's like that scene in it, that shot. Like I love when scenes can feel like they could be short films in and of themselves. And I think that the same could be said for that shot alone.
100%.
Um, and so I guess to answer your question, that is actually one of the examples where it is a simple setup for on my side of things. So I do remember getting like kind of wrapped up in their performances in that. Uh, Also just because like again, like in the same way, similar to Georgia and Colin, um, even more so maybe with between Georgia and Hayleigh, like they were in the same acting class as well, and like they just like there is such a deep comfortability to be vulnerable with one another, that like it just like created the most heartbreaking stuff. And uh Yeah, no, I mean, and also like that, it's like I going back to a previous question of yours, just as a comparison, it's like we're talking about the scene by the river. It's like I wasn't that close to her during that scene. It's like for a scene like that, I would prefer not to be have the camera terribly close. I'd rather be a little bit further away with a longer lens, so they can forget about me a little bit. This shot, just because of the space itself and how small that room is, and like we wanted it to be in a two shot, we didn't want it to be um, too shallow of a focus, so I was probably on like a 35 lens for that. Um, I was pretty close to them. I think they were, maybe like 6 inches and like, I don't know, a foot in front of the lens or something like that. So it did feel very intimate, being right there with them. Um, uh, yeah, that was a really rewarding sequence to shoot.
Okay, because for once, I can't imagine acting this deep, this emotionally charged when the camera is just so close to me? How do you think actors forget the presence of the camera and the lens? Because especially when it's that close as you, like I can't even wrap my head around it.
I really can't either. Honestly, it's like I wonder. A part of me wishes I took. I mean, I always wish that I had taken acting courses in school just to
Me
get a better
too.
look into. Yeah, right. I think it would have been so insightful for my job now, and I mean, I guess there's still time, but I I I really admire. Honestly, that has always been one of the most perplexing things about acting is just how they could forget about all of this technical stuff that's occurring around them. Like so much stuff, and so much. I mean, I don't know. They just to be able to, you know, submerge yourself into such authenticity, and then have so much weird stuff that's like taking you out of the time period. I imagine would be very distracting. It's a funny question because I'm like I've never asked an actor about that, how that feels. Like I would be curious just to ask Georgia and Hayleigh, like
I
what does
will
that feel like
interview
to have?
them and I will ask them the question for the both of us because
Mhm.
I'm interviewing
Are
them
you interviewing
soon.
them? Oh, you
Yes,
are? Okay, great. Yeah, no, please. Yeah,
definitely. This question is on behalf of Aidan and me.
yeah. Because it doesn't feel good. It feels like an invasion of privacy. Honestly, it does.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of filmmakers that I admire do, in part shoot with long lenses a lot so they can just keep a distance away from the actors so they can kind of forget about it. But like sometimes you're in a circumstance where you're in a situation where you just do have to be close by. And particularly like that scene is, I'd imagine, is very hard because like so much of the action is happening directly facing the lens too. Like when Georgia exits frame and we're just left with Hayleigh, she just kind of shifts toward us, and like
True.
it's almost like you'd imagine that she's just looking in like directly into the barrel of the lens, and it's like how one stays in. I don't know, but the same could be said for like, I mean, these are, actors who are all trained in theater too. And like the same could be said for how do you act with like 150 people out in an audience staring back at you, you know?
It's true.
Um, so they're just pros. I wonder, I mean, when you talk to them, you should ask them about like if there is specific training for that. I would wonder how much their education accounts for, not only working for um, not only film acting, but like just how to deal with the sort of inauthentic or fabricated nature of the surroundings. Um, yeah, it's weird, but I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know. I don't know how they do it. They're good at their job.
They're good at their job. They're just good. They're just great. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Most difficult scene to shoot and the one that was most enjoyable. And most difficult scene might not seem to me as difficult. Like it could be a very, very simple scene that I just watched and was like, okay, normal. But for you, the preparation or probably all the specifics were hectic.
Huh. Most difficult scene to shoot. Basically there are these sequences that take place in New York, where
Okay.
we're shooting in Central Park and we're shooting in Chad and Colin's apartment, and like that, trying to make those look like 1940s Appalachia
Period specific and
is
stuff. Hmm.
period specific is hard. And so much of the credit goes to Colin and Chad for how much work they put into scouting very specific locations in Central Park. There's one scene, and I honestly think that it was probably the hardest scene. It was one of the first scenes that we shot. It was a scene with oh, forgive me, I'm blanking on the character's name, but it's Brooke's husband that we
Yes.
only see for one scene. Do you remember this scene where it's when Colin goes into when Teddy goes to speak with him in his
Yes.
bedroom, and he's like ailing, and then they kiss. Yeah.
Yes.
Um that
It
scene's
was a beautiful scene.
that scene's Chad and Colin's bedroom, and that they just like
Wow.
in Inwood, New York City, and like um they they like put up all the lighting. It was difficult. We tried to go quite dim, and so it's very moody. But they like put all this newspaper on the wall too, and like it was really really convincing. And Colin specifically, I think, has such a deep understanding and love uh for period specifics and history that like as hard as it probably was, you could tell that there was just so much joy put into the detail of it all. But that was also just a hard scene to shoot. It's very emotional and it's all in one take too. And so
Yes.
when Teddy sits down in that room and the camera just slowly pans from him um to the his monologue, it goes on for like 2 to 3 minutes, and then we're slowly going back, and then that resorts in the kiss moment, and it's just yeah. I mean, I don't know why that was a difficult scene to shoot. I think it was emotionally palpable. I think there's like so much. I think there's so much. There is a certain pressure to shooting a scene with a character that only appears once in the movie,
I
and so
agree.
it's like, how do we, how do we, um, shoot this in a way that feels kind of singular and
Mhm.
specific to this person, you
Yes.
know? And it was one of the first scenes that we shot, so it was kind of it was establishing tone to us, in a way.
The movie
Um,
itself, yes. Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it's interesting to establish tone in a place like New York City too, when when it's doubling for something like Appalachia. So because it becomes so much easier to shoot there because the
Yes.
backdrops are just so naturally beautiful. So it's like we kind of just had to figure out the look of the movie with all of these added uh difficulties and challenges of like having to make this very urban place look very period specific and rural. Um, so yeah,
Okay, so this was like the most difficult. Was there a most
yes,
enjoyable one that you really had fun shooting?
yeah, yeah, totally. I really love the uh, there's a couple. I mean, I one of my favorite moments to shoot and just in the movie is when they're having the converse when Brooke and Haley are sorry, when Brooke and Georgia are having a conversation with Teddy, and it's this long shot where Teddy's smoking on the outside and he's peeking in through the window, and he keeps kind of, it's like, it's so theatrical, and it just like felt so, um, that was it wasn't one of the first times, but that I felt this way on set, but it really felt like it was all clicking together for me. Like it felt like Colin's vision was really clicking for me. I was like, okay, like I understand like how you see this movie very clearly now. And that was a really fun moment because it really helped um, inform how we were going to be shooting the rest of the movie. And like I think like leaning um into such a theater like aesthetic into really helped, and um I yeah, it's just such a fun blocking, just having him on the outside of the window coming in and out, and like it's saying so much about the separation of the characters. And when he comes back in, it's like when he gets a new opportunity at finding a purpose in life by working with Brooke's character. And um, it was just such a creative thing. And even if like the audience doesn't pick up those like small like symbolisms inside the blocking, which many people won't, at least consciously. There is like a subconscious layer there that I think will
Resonate, definitely.
resonate. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. But I think honestly, and this is purely like I think my favorite moment uh, on set was um, we had to get the last scene of the movie, which is when they were standing outside the sunset. And it might sound cheesy, but like I don't care. Sunsets are great for a they're like who doesn't,
Of
they're
course.
cliche for a reason. They're beautiful, and like I'm not kidding. So we basically, we had to get the scene. We were shooting really long days, so every day, it was almost every day that we were like, okay, we got to shoot, we have to go and find a sunset, we have to shoot this. But then we were like, oh, we're behind on this other stuff that we need to get, so we need to keep shooting. And then we'd be shooting into nighttime, and we would lose the sunset. And it was not until the final night of the shoot that we were like, oh no, we have to get we have to get the ending scene. We have, like, this is our last opportunity to do it before we fly back to New York. And we were driving around, and I think we were driving home from another exterior shoot, actually, and we were kind of just banking on there being a sunset. And I'm not exaggerating when I say, like, it was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen in my entire life. And so, like, those moments always feel really, really magical. It's like when I feel like I've been very lucky on a lot of uh indie films and like lower budget stuff, where like just like encountering like very natural beauty and like these weird like serendipitous moments that are fleeting, and you only have a few minutes to get it. And it's like we just like slammed the brakes, and we just like had like 5 minutes before it looked completely different, and it was just so cool. And the whole team was there, and yeah, I mean, yeah, so that was my favorite moment.
That's when the magic happens on screen, and I really felt it, and it came to me. I absorbed it while I watched the movie. Aidan, thank you so much for opening your heart to me and being so
Of
generous with
course.
your time. This was an amazing
Mhm.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jaylan. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Thank you.